Camp Forest, Tennessee. January 1945. The smell reached them before the doors opened. Something warm, something fried, something that had no name in the vocabulary of the last 2 years because the last 2 years had not contained anything like it. Marta said quietly, "Whatever this is, it has a purpose." Lenny wasn't listening. She was standing very still with her eyes closed, trying to identify the smell before it arrived. Then the doors opened, and neither of them had a framework for what was on those trays. The first thing Lenny Bauer did when the Americans arrived was look at their boots. Her father had taught her this without meaning to. 20 years in a factory, 2 years unemployed, a man who had learned to read situations by reading what people chose to put on their feet. Good boots meant a man who expected to be somewhere for a while. Worn boots meant a man who had been somewhere too long. These boots were worn but maintained, resoled at least once, cleaned recently. The laces replaced at different times on different pairs. Men who maintained their boots in the field were men who had learned to take care of what they had because they knew how long things needed to last. She picked up her bag and got in line. Behind her, Marta Engel was already speaking. 3 sentences of careful English delivered to the senior soldier with the measured precision of someone who had been rehearsing them. They were non-combatant auxiliaries. They were entitled to Geneva Convention treatment. They were prepared to cooperate fully with processing. The soldier listened. He nodded. He said something to the man beside him. He was professional and unhurried and entirely uninterested in performing anything for anyone in the room. Lenny watched his face while Marta spoke. Then she looked back at her boots. Marta was 31 years old and had been a school teacher in Hamburg before the war. German language and literature, secondary level. She was good at it in the specific way of people whose gift matches their work so completely that the work becomes the person. She had a particular method that her students remembered long after they left her class. She would put a passage on the board and say, "Don't tell me what it says, tell me what it wants." She had spent the last 2 years applying this method to the war. She had read the internal logic of it, the narrative arc, the point at which the structure of events became legible to anyone willing to look at the text honestly, rather than the way they needed it to read. She had understood for at least a year where the story was going. She had continued her work anyway, maintaining the signals post, updating the maps, filing the reports, because the alternative was a space her framework could not contain, and Marta did not operate in spaces her framework could not contain. When the Americans arrived, she was ready. She had prepared for them the way she prepared for difficult parent meetings. Clear sentences, controlled register, no unnecessary information offered. She delivered her 3 sentences and watched the soldier's face for the response she expected. He nodded and turned away and started organizing the room. She had prepared for hostility, for skepticism, for the performance of authority that men with weapons typically required from people who had just surrendered to them. She had not prepared for indifference. She filed this and said nothing. Lenny was 20 years old and from a town of 3,000 people in Saxony that existed because a factory existed there. Her father had worked in that factory for 18 years. When the factory reduced its workforce, he had been among the first to go. Not because he was bad at the work, but because seniority protected the men above him, and there were many men above him. After that, the family had lived the specific life of people permanently slightly short of what was needed. Not dramatically short. Not the kind of short that produced visible suffering or the sympathy of neighbors. The quiet kind, where breakfast was bread and ersatz coffee when there was enough bread and ersatz coffee, and the understood silence about what it meant when there wasn't. She had joined the auxiliaries because her older brother was already in uniform, and staying home felt like a statement she didn't intend to make. Signals work suited her. She was fast, precise, good at receiving information without imposing interpretation on it. She did not have Marta's analytical gift. She had a different one. The immediate, accurate reading of a situation's actual temperature, independent of what anyone said about it. She had developed this in a household where what was said and what was true were frequently different things, and survival required knowing which was which. If you are enjoying this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel so you never miss a new video. And now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling me where in the US you are watching this video. She had read the actual temperature of the war for at least a year before it ended. She had said nothing because nothing she said would have changed the temperature. They were held in a temporary facility near the port for 10 days. Concrete floors, salt air through the wall gaps, watery soup twice a day. Marta organized the women immediately. Sleeping positions, a daily schedule, a framework of routine that imposed structure on a situation that had no structure of its own. She was good at this. It was the same skill as teaching applied to different material. A room of frightened women was not so different from a classroom of uncertain adolescents. What both needed was the visible evidence that someone in the room knew what they were doing. Lenny watched her do it and found it useful. On the second evening, Marta explained their situation to the group. American custody, transport to the United States. The apparent decency they had observed so far. The professional guards, the medical check, the thin but regular food, was standard operating procedure rather than genuine sentiment. A system's investment in prisoner compliance and Geneva Convention legal standing. She laid this out with the economy of a teacher who had learned to say difficult things to young people without softening them past the point of utility. The women listened and agreed. "That's probably right," Lenny said. Marta looked at her. "Probably." "The part about the system is right," Lenny said. "I just think systems are made of people, and some people are decent and some aren't. The ones we've met so far have been decent. I don't need a larger theory for that." "Without a larger theory, you have no framework for understanding what they want from the decency," Marta said. "What if they don't want anything specific? What if some places just have enough and they give it because giving it costs them nothing?" "Places like that don't exist," Marta said. Lenny looked at her with the patient expression of someone who has read a different temperature than the one being described. "Germany existed to you too, until it didn't." The room was quiet for a moment. Marta delivered the rest of her analysis. Lenny listened without further comment, but the sentence sat in the room after the discussion ended, and several women glanced at Lenny as they went to their sleeping positions, with the particular look of people who have heard something they will think about later in the dark. The ship left in November. 160 women. 12 days across the autumn Atlantic. Gray water, rolling swells, the lower decks thick with seasickness, and the specific anxiety of people being transported toward an unknown that had been described to them in terms designed to make it frightening. Marta maintained her schedule as the motion permitted. Evening discussions, structured routine, the deliberate maintenance of coherence against dissolution. Lenny attended the discussions and was useful afterward. On the 8th day, she noticed the guard. He was 22 perhaps, assigned to their deck, professional and distant in the standard way. A woman 2 bunks from Lenny had been visibly unwell for 2 days. Not dramatically, just the pale, diminished quality of someone whose body was using more than it had. The guard passed her on his rounds and stopped. He said something quietly. She shook her head. He went away and came back 20 minutes later with something from the medical kit. He gave it to her and returned to his post without ceremony. Nobody had asked him to do this. Lenny filed it in the honest account she kept, the one that tracked actual temperature rather than stated temperature. That evening, Marta said, "The guard this afternoon, the medicine." Lenny looked at her. "You saw it too." "I saw it. It could be standard practice. Maintain prisoner health during transport, reduce medical incidents on arrival." "It could be," Lenny said. "You don't think it is?" "I think it could be both," Lenny said. "Standard practice and also a man who looked at a sick woman and did something about it. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Marta was quiet for a moment. "You make it very difficult to maintain a clean, analytical position." "I know," Lenny said. "I've been told that before." They arrived in Tennessee on a gray December morning. The countryside through the truck's canvas gap was nothing Marta had prepared for. She had prepared for America as a concept. Large, industrial, loud, the material and cultural character she had assembled through years of information filtered through a system with specific interests. Tennessee winter farmland at 7 in the morning was not that. Low gray sky, dark bare trees, white farmhouses with smoke from their chimneys, intact red barns, cattle in fields that had never been bombed standing in the cold with the complete indifference of animals that had no category for war. Lenny pressed her face to the canvas gap and was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It smells like nothing's burned." Marta looked at the farmhouses passing and had no framework notation for this. She let it pass. Camp Forest was large and functional, and processed them with the efficient indifference of a system that had done this before and expected to do it again. Medical check, shower, hot with real soap, clean clothes, bunk assignment. A female American officer explained the schedule in careful German, answered questions, moved on. The mess hall served thin soup for dinner. Marta noted this. Baseline confirmed. Minimum standards, no excess. Her bunk was in Barrack 7. Real mattress, sheets, 2 wool blankets. Lenny's bunk was above. That first night, Marta organized her observations into categories and prepared her framework for the days ahead. The system was what it was. She understood it. She would operate inside it with clarity and without susceptibility. From the bunk above, Lenny said, "What do you think tomorrow will be like?" "More of the same," Marta said. "Minimum rations during processing. Thin soup, perhaps bread." "Makes sense." "Marta." "Yes." "I keep thinking about the guard on the ship, the one with the medicine." "What about him?" "Nothing specific," Lenny said. "Just that he looked at her and saw that she was sick and did something before she had to ask." Marta looked at the ceiling. Outside, the Tennessee night was cold and quiet and smelled of pine and wood smoke, and nothing burned. "Go to sleep, Lenny," she said. "Good night, Marta." The barrack settled into its nighttime sounds. Somewhere at the far end, a woman prayed quietly. Others breathed the slow breath of exhausted sleep. Marta looked at the ceiling and thought about the guard on the ship and the maintained boots on the Americans in the doorway, and Lenny's sentence, "Germany existed to you too until it didn't," and the specific quality of the Tennessee night outside, which was the quality of a place where nothing had recently been on fire. She closed her eyes. In approximately 8 hours, something would arrive on a metal tray that her framework had no prepared category for. She did not know this yet. She slept until the bell rang at 6. The Tennessee morning came through the barrack windows as a flat gray light, the kind that carries cold in it before the cold arrives. Marta dressed in the dark with the economical efficiency she had developed over 2 years of changing clothes in insufficient spaces. Around her, the other women rose in the same silence, the specific quiet of people who have not yet decided what the day requires of them. Lenny dropped from the upper bunk and landed lightly and looked at Marta with the alert expression she always had in the mornings, as though she had been awake for some time already inside the sleep. "Soup again," Marta said. Probably, Lenny said. They filed out into the cold with the others. The mess hall was across a swept dirt path, its windows lit yellow from inside. The women assembled in a loose line outside the doors. The morning air was cold and still and smelled of pine resin and wood smoke from the kitchen chimney, and something else. Something underneath the wood smoke that Marta noticed without immediately categorizing. Something warm. Something fried. She noted it the way she noted everything, clinically, without investment. Lenny had gone still beside her. Not tense. Just still. The particular stillness of someone whose attention has been completely captured by a single piece of incoming information. Her eyes were closed. She was identifying the smell the way you identify something you once knew very well and have not encountered in long enough that it takes a moment to find the correct file. "Lenny," Marta said. Lenny didn't answer. She was somewhere inside the smell. The mess hall doors opened. The warmth came first, the specific warmth of a large room that has had a fire going since before dawn, dry and heavy and immediate against the cold outside. Then the smell arrived in full, no longer filtered by distance and morning air, but direct, close, complete. Something baked, something buttery, something fried and fat, seasoned, real. The line moved forward. Marta moved with it, watching the room rather than the food counter. She was looking for the structure of the moment. Who was watching, how the guards were positioned, what the documentation of this looked like from an operational standpoint. She found one guard against the far wall, arms folded, watching the room with the expression of a man performing a routine task. He was not taking notes. He was not observing with the focused attention of someone gathering evidence. He was simply present, doing his job the way people did jobs they had done many times. Marta reached the counter. The American woman behind it placed items on the tray without asking. Biscuits, 2 of them, soft and pale and steaming slightly at the break. A ladle of thick gravy, brown and heavy, poured across the biscuits without ceremony. 2 eggs, fried, the edges crisped in the way eggs crisped in real fat, a link of sausage, a cup of coffee, black and hot, a small glass of something orange, cold, bright, the color of a thing that belonged to a different season entirely. Marta looked at the tray. She picked it up and moved to a table and sat down. She did not eat immediately. She looked at what was in front of her with the attention of someone reading a text for its internal logic before engaging with its surface meaning. The food was real. She could see it was real. The steam, the texture, the smell that was now so close it was almost physical. The quantity was more than she had eaten at a single meal in at least a year. Lenny sat across from her. She was holding the glass of orange juice up slightly, not quite to the light, but almost, looking at the color of it. Her expression was not readable in the usual sense. It was the expression of someone encountering something they had entirely stopped expecting to encounter. "Lenny," Marta said. "I haven't seen an orange in 3 years," Lenny said. She said it quietly to herself as much as to Marta, as though the sentence needed to be said aloud to be real. She drank it in one motion and set the glass down and sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up her fork and began eating with the focused attention of someone whose body has made a decision independently of everything else. Marta looked at her own tray. She picked up the biscuit. She took a bite with the careful attention of someone tasting for information, for the thing behind the surface, for what the text wanted rather than what it said. The biscuit was warm and soft, and the gravy was heavy and seasoned in the way that food was seasoned when the person cooking it had enough seasoning and used it without calculation. The flavor arrived with a completeness that her body responded to before her mind could organize a response. She chewed slowly. Around the table, women were eating in the specific silence of people concentrating completely on a single thing, some with tears running quietly, some with the blank expression of people receiving something they had no current category for. One woman, a former clerk from Dresden, held her fork halfway to her mouth and simply looked at the eggs as though making sure they would still be there when she moved. "They're testing us," said a woman to Marta's left. Her name was Berta, a telephone operator from Cologne, older than most of them. "Watching how we respond to being treated well. It tells them something about us." "What does it tell them?" the woman beside her said. "How easy we are to manage," Berta said. "A prisoner who responds well to comfort is a prisoner who can be controlled with comfort. They're taking inventory." Several women nodded. Lenny was eating steadily and said without looking up, "My father worked in a factory in Zwickau for 20 years. He never once ate a breakfast like this." The table went quiet. "I'm not saying it means something good about them," Lenny said. "I'm saying it means something. What kind of enemy feeds you better than your own father ever ate in 20 years of honest work?" Marta looked at her. The question sat at the table among the steam and the smell and the sound of women eating, and nobody had a clean answer for it. Berta opened her mouth and closed it. The woman beside her looked at her eggs. Marta looked at her biscuit. She thought about Hamburg. Her classroom with its 26 desks, 9 of them empty by the 3rd year. The school meals in the last months, thin and apologetic and served by kitchen staff who had long since stopped pretending the portions were sufficient. She had eaten those meals and taught those classes and written those lesson plans and told those children, in the indirect way of a teacher who cannot say the true thing directly, that the structure of a difficult text was best understood from the inside. She was inside a different text now. She was trying to read it. She took another bite of the biscuit and thought about what it wanted and found, for the first time in 2 years of applying her method to everything, that the text was not cooperating with her reading. After the meal, the women returned to the barracks carrying the morning in their bodies, the warmth of the food, the specific weight of having eaten something real, the confusion that had no clean place to settle. The conversation started before they were through the door. "It won't happen again," Berta said. "A meal like that costs too much to be daily policy." It was an arrival gesture, a first impression. "The Geneva Convention requires adequate nutrition," another woman said. "Perhaps adequate here means something different than adequate in Germany." "It's a show," said a third. "For documentation, for the Red Cross reports. One good meal they can point to." The theories accumulated. Each one had internal logic. Each one produced the same conclusion: temporary, strategic, explainable, not to be trusted as a baseline. Marta listened and organized and said, "All of those explanations are consistent with what we observed. We maintain our assessment until we have contradictory evidence." "What counts as contradictory evidence?" Lenny said. "If the meal is repeated without strategic occasion," Marta said. "Tomorrow morning, with no Red Cross present, no documentation visible, no arrival context to justify the expenditure, then we have something that requires a different explanation. And if it happens again the morning after that," Lenny said, "then we will need a different framework entirely," Marta said. Lenny sat on the edge of her bunk. "I think you already know it's going to happen again." Marta looked at her. "I think we both know," Lenny said. "I think that's why the theories are so detailed. Detailed theories are what you build when the simple explanation is the one you don't want." The barracks was quiet for a moment. "Go to sleep, Lenny," Marta said. "It's 9 in the morning," Lenny said. "Then find something useful to do." Lenny smiled, which was not a common expression on her face and was therefore more effective when it appeared. She got up and went to the window and looked at the Tennessee morning outside, gray and cold and intact, the camp going about its first hours with the unhurried routine of a place that expected to be here for a while. Marta sat on her bunk and looked at her hands. She was thinking about the orange juice, the color of it in the glass, the way Lenny had held it almost to the light before drinking it, the way you hold something you need to confirm is real before you trust it enough to consume. She was thinking about what it meant that an enemy had put that glass on a breakfast tray and handed it to a prisoner without ceremony, without documentation, without anything resembling the strategic apparatus that would justify the cost. She was thinking about the simple explanation. She did not want the simple explanation. Not because it served them poorly, but because if the simple explanation was true, then the framework she had been building and maintaining and defending was built on a measurement that was wrong. And a cartographer who works from a wrong measurement does not merely produce an inaccurate map. She produces a map of a place that does not exist. She looked at her hands for a long time. Outside, the Tennessee morning continued, cold and gray, and entirely indifferent to whether she was ready for it. The next morning she woke before the bell. She lay in the dark and listened to the barracks breathe around her, and did not examine why she was awake. She dressed in the cold and sat on the edge of her bunk and waited for 6 o'clock with the specific patience of someone who is pretending not to be waiting for something. From above, Lenny said, "You're already up." "Yes, me too." Neither of them said anything about why. The line outside the mess hall formed earlier than the previous morning. Not dramatically earlier, 10 minutes perhaps, 15. But the women were there before the bell finished ringing, dressed and assembled with a speed that nobody acknowledged as unusual. Several of them were looking at the mess hall doors with the careful indifference of people trying not to appear to be looking at the mess hall doors. Marta stood in line and watched the kitchen window. Steam on the glass, yellow light inside. The smell arriving again through the cold air, warm, fried, real, and moving through the assembled women the way the smell had moved the morning before, producing the same involuntary stillness, the same private internal reckoning. The doors opened. The trays came down the counter. Biscuits, gravy, eggs, sausage, coffee, the small glass of orange juice, cold and bright. Not exactly the same meal. The eggs were scrambled this morning rather than fried, the sausage slightly different. But the quantity was the same. The quality was the same. The orange juice was the same. Marta carried her tray to the table and sat down. She looked at the guard against the far wall. He was not the same guard as yesterday. Different man, same posture. Arms folded, watching the room with the expression of routine rather than observation. No notebook, no focused attention. Just a man doing a job he had done before and would do again tomorrow. Berta sat down across from her. She looked at her tray. She looked at the guard. She looked at Marta. "So," she said. "Not a one-time gesture?" "No," Marta said. "Red Cross inspection scheduled?" "I haven't seen any indication of one." Berta picked up her fork. "Documentation for something else then? A report? A visit?" "Possibly," Marta said. Lenny sat down beside Berta and picked up the orange juice and drank it in the same motion as the morning before. Not savoring, not performing, just drinking it because it was there and she wanted it. Then she picked up her fork and began eating. "It's not for a report," she said. Berta looked at her. "You can't know that." "I can't know it for certain," Lenny said. "But reports get filed once. If this were documentation, they'd have what they needed. They wouldn't repeat the expense." "Unless the report requires multiple entries," Marta said. "Then why change the eggs?" Lenny said. "If you're documenting a standard meal for a report, you serve the same meal. You don't vary it. Variation is what you do when you're cooking for people rather than recording for a file." The table was quiet for a moment. Marta looked at her scrambled eggs. She ate them. The third morning, the line formed even earlier. Nobody said anything about this either. The women assembled outside in the pre-dawn cold with their coats pulled tight and their breath visible, and their eyes on the kitchen window and the general atmosphere of a group of people engaged in a collective pretense that had become too transparent to maintain, but which nobody was prepared to abandon first. Lenny stood beside Marta and said, "We're all here 20 minutes early." "I noticed," Marta said. "That's interesting, isn't it? Yesterday we had a theory that explained it away. This morning we have no theory, and we're still here 20 minutes early." "The body adapts to reliable food sources," Marta said. "It's physiological, not psychological." Lenny looked at her with the patient expression. "Marta." "What?" "The body and the mind are not separate systems with separate responses." Marta looked at the kitchen window. "I know that." "I know you know it," Lenny said. "I'm pointing it out anyway." The doors opened. The smell came out. The line moved forward and the trays came down the counter, and the morning repeated itself with the specific quality of things that are becoming ordinary. Not dramatic, not charged with the significance of the first time, just present and warm and real and there. That, Marta was beginning to understand, was the most destabilizing quality of all. The first morning had been a shock. The second had been a test of the theory. The third was something else. The specific weight of a pattern, which was heavier than either shock or theory, because patterns did not require explanation. They simply were. A pattern said, "This is how things are here." And once a pattern said that, the framework built to explain it away had to work increasingly hard against the evidence of the body that had been fed 3 times and was beginning, without asking permission, to expect a fourth. The medic came on the 4th morning. Marta was halfway through her biscuit when she noticed him, a young American in medical corps insignia moving between the tables with a quiet, unhurried attention. He stopped at a woman 3 seats down who had been coughing for days. He spoke to her softly. He looked at her throat, her eyes. He took something from his kit and gave it to her with brief instructions. He moved on to another woman who looked pale and tired. Asked something. Listened. Gave her something small wrapped in paper. Nobody had requested him. No guard had called him over. He had simply appeared with his kit and was moving through the room doing what he did because he had looked and seen that some people needed it. Lenny was watching him too. After he passed their table, she said, "Like the guard on the ship?" "Yes," Marta said. Nobody asked him either. "No." Lenny ate for a moment. "What's the theory for that?" Marta looked at the medic's back moving between the tables. She had a theory, the same structural theory she had applied to the guard on the ship. Maintain prisoner health, reduce medical incidents, standard operational protocol. It was a reasonable theory. It had served her for 11 days. She looked at the medic stop at a woman in the corner who had not raised her hand or signaled anything. He had simply noticed, from across the room, that something was wrong and had gone to it. The theory, Marta said carefully, requires that the system anticipates every individual case and instructs its personnel to address them, which would mean the system is very good. Or, Lenny said, or the people inside the system are making individual decisions based on what they observe. Which means, Marta looked at her biscuit, which means the decency is not entirely systemic. Some of it is personal. And personal decency, Lenny said, is harder to explain as strategy. The mess hall was warm around them. The Tennessee morning pressed gray against the windows. Women ate and talked in the low register that had become the standard music of breakfast. Not happy exactly, but lighter than anything that had come before. The specific lightness of people who have stopped waiting for the meal to be taken away. Marta ate her biscuit and said nothing more. She was thinking about what personal decency meant in the framework she had constructed. The framework had room for systemic generosity. She had built that room deliberately, with good structural reasoning. It did not have room for a medic who noticed a woman in the corner without being told to look. The room that didn't exist in the framework was getting difficult to ignore. That evening, the group discussion in the barracks ran longer than usual. Berta opened it with a revised theory, not a one-time gesture, not documentation, but a deliberate policy of comfort designed to produce a specific prisoner psychology. Compliant, productive, non-resistant. The breakfast was an ongoing investment in operational outcomes. This was, she said, the most coherent explanation available. Several women agreed. Marta agreed too. She said the words with the precision she brought to all her analyses and meant them in the sense that the logical structure was sound. But she was also sitting in the corner of the barracks listening to Berta present the theory with its careful architecture, thinking about the medic moving between the tables without instruction, about the guard on the ship who had come back with medicine, about Lenny's question, what kind of enemy feeds you better than your own father ever ate in 20 years of honest work? She was a language teacher. She knew the difference between a text that argued one thing and meant another. She had taught it for 8 years. She was beginning to suspect that the text she was writing, the analysis, the framework, the careful architecture of explanation, was arguing one thing and meaning another. After the discussion, the barrack settled into its night sounds. Marta lay on her mattress and looked at the ceiling. Lenny said from above, "You were very quiet tonight." "I was listening," Marta said, "to Berta's theory." "Yes." "What did you think?" Marta was quiet for a moment. "I think it's the best theory we have." "That's not the same as thinking it's right," Lenny said. "No," Marta said. "It isn't." The barracks was quiet. "My mother's breakfast," Lenny said, almost to herself. "Before my father lost his job, bread, real bread with lard, sometimes an egg on Sundays. She'd put it on the table like it was nothing, just breakfast, just Tuesday, just what you do in the morning." A pause. "That's what this feels like, not a strategy, just Tuesday." Marta looked at the ceiling. "Just Tuesday is the most dangerous thing," she said quietly. "Why? Because you can argue against a strategy. You can maintain your position against something that wants something from you." She paused. "You cannot argue against Tuesday. Tuesday just keeps being Tuesday." Lenny was quiet for a long time. Then, "There's a letter from my mother in the Morning Post. I haven't opened it yet." "Why not?" "Because I know what's in it," Lenny said. "The same as the last one. Managing. Bread when there's bread. The factory town getting smaller. I'll open it in the morning. After breakfast." Marta understood this completely. After breakfast, when there was something warm still in the body, was the correct time to open letters that contained the word managing. It did not make the word smaller, but it made the body slightly more capable of receiving it. She said nothing. Outside, the Tennessee night was cold and still. Somewhere beyond the camp perimeter, the farmhouses had their lights off, and the cattle stood in the dark fields, and the winter countryside went on in every direction. Intact and ordinary and entirely unaware that inside Barrack 7, a woman was lying awake, slowly running out of material to build her framework from. The fourth breakfast would come in approximately 8 hours, and the fifth after that, and the Tuesday after that. The fifth breakfast was the same as the fourth. Lenny ate it without comment, which was itself a kind of comment. The absence of the orange juice observation, the absence of any observation at all. She ate with the focused efficiency of someone getting through a necessary task rather than receiving something. When she finished, she set her fork down and looked at the tray the way you look at something that has already done what it was going to do. The letter was in her coat pocket. Marta had watched her put it there before they left the barracks. Around them, the mess hall carried on its morning. Women eating, the low music of conversation, the guards in their positions doing nothing in particular. The smell of biscuits and coffee and fried fat was already becoming the smell of mornings. The way a smell becomes invisible once it belongs to every day rather than a particular one. Lenny took the letter out. She held it on the table beside her tray, not opening it yet, just letting it be there in the light. 2 pages in her mother's school hand, the envelope slightly worn from being in the pocket. The stamps were German. The postmark was from a month ago, which meant the letter had traveled through the specific bureaucratic machinery of prisoner correspondence and arrived with the delay of something that had passed through many hands before reaching the right one. She broke the seal and read. Marta watched the table. Not Lenny. The table, the grain of the wood, the ring left by a coffee cup from a previous meal. She gave Lenny the privacy of appearing not to watch while watching with the peripheral attention she had developed as a teacher for exactly this purpose. The monitoring of a person who needed to be seen without being looked at. Lenny read both pages slowly. Her face held the same quality it had held since she'd taken the letter out. Not closed, not composed, simply present with what was on the page. When she finished, she folded it along its original creases and held it in both hands on the table. The mess hall was warm around them. Managing, she said. Yes, Marta said. She says the winter has been hard, but they are managing. The bread allocation was reduced again in November, but the neighbor's family shares when they have extra. Lenny looked at the folded letter. My brother is still in the Soviet camp. She doesn't know when. Marta said nothing. The sentence about the brother had a specific weight that required nothing added to it. She asks how the food is, Lenny said. She said it the way you say something that contains more than the words carry. Quietly, without inflection, setting it on the table between them like a found object whose origin needed to be looked at. She asked how the food is. Marta looked at the tray in front of Lenny. The cleared plate, the coffee cup still half full. Real coffee, the second cup this week. On the tray beside it, the small glass that had held orange juice. Empty now, drained before Lenny had picked up her fork, because by the 5th morning, it was simply what you did first. She asked how the food is. Lenny set the letter on the table and pressed it flat with both palms, a slow, deliberate gesture, as though she were trying to make it smaller without folding it again. Her hand stayed on it for a moment. Outside the mess hall windows, the Tennessee morning was the same gray it always was, the same pine trees at the perimeter, the same curl of smoke from the kitchen chimney going straight up into the still winter air. I don't know how to write that sentence, Lenny said. I've been trying since the 2nd morning. I have 15 versions in my head and none of them are right. What's wrong with them? Marta said. They're either true in a way she can't receive, or they're small enough to receive, but they're not true. She looked at her coffee. If I say we are fed adequately, she'll understand that to mean the minimum, which isn't what this is. If I say we eat better than I did at home, she'll think I mean something slight. But I don't mean something slight. No, Marta said. I mean I am eating better here, as a prisoner, than my father ate in 20 years of working. Lenny picked up the coffee. And she is sitting in a room in Zwickau with a reduced bread allocation, wondering how I'm managing. The table was quiet. Berta was 2 seats down and had been listening without appearing to listen, which was her method with everything. She put her fork down carefully. What does it mean? She said. Not as a challenge, but as an actual question. The kind that came from somewhere undefended. Nobody answered for a moment. "It means the shortage was not the natural condition of things," Lenny said. She said it the way you say something you have known for several days and are only now finding the sentence for. Somewhere the whole time there was enough. There was more than enough. And we were in a room with a reduced bread allocation, being told the reason was the enemies at the border, the enemies in the banks, the enemies in the newspapers. Berta looked at her coffee cup. "My father believed it," Lenny said. "He worked 18 years and he believed every word of it because the alternative was that the shortage was a decision. And a man who works 18 years and cannot put enough on the table, he needs the shortage to be real. Because if it isn't real..." She stopped. Marta finished it, not aloud, but in the space where the sentence ended. If it isn't real, someone made it. Someone looked at what there was and decided how it would be distributed, and who would have enough, and who would have the reduced allocation, and who would trade a silver locket for half a kilogram of potatoes. She looked at the tray. She had been applying her method to this place for 5 days, reading the text for what it wanted rather than what it said, building careful, analytical distance between herself and the evidence. She had done this because the alternative was a space her framework could not contain. She was in that space now, not because of the biscuits or the orange juice or the coffee or the guard on the ship with the medicine, because of a letter from Zwickau on a table in Tennessee, because of a woman's mother with a reduced bread allocation who wanted to know how the food was, because of the distance between those two things, which was not a natural distance, not a distance produced by war or geography or the hard, ordinary conditions of living. It was a made distance, a decided distance, and someone had done the deciding. "What will you write?" Marta said. Lenny folded the letter and put it back in her pocket. "I'll write that we are fed regularly and well. I'll write not to worry about that." She picked up her coffee and finished it. 10 words, all of them true. And the rest? The rest she'll have to see herself. Lenny looked at the mess hall, the women at the tables, the ordinary working morning of a place that had never questioned whether breakfast would be there. Or she won't. Some things you can only understand from inside. The truck to town came 2 days later. Marta had known it was coming. A notice on the board, supervised excursion, administrative requirement. She had read it with the indifference she had been practicing since the letter, which was not genuine indifference but the posture of someone who has recently had their framework dismantled and has not yet built the next one and is navigating the interval with whatever composure is available. The town was 20 minutes through the winter farmland. Lenny sat at the canvas gap the same way she always did, the alert watching stillness, reading the countryside as it passed, the farmhouses, the barns, the cattle indifferent in the fields. She did not say it smells like nothing's burned this time. She had already said it. She didn't need to say it again. The main street was modest and intact and organized around the ordinary business of people who had spent the last 4 years reading about a war rather than living inside one. Hardware, dry goods, the diner with its steamed window, a barber shop with a waiting customer visible through the glass, reading a newspaper with the specific patience of a man who has nowhere pressing to be. Marta walked and read the street the way she read everything, for what it wanted rather than what it said. She stopped at the produce stand, a wooden crate of oranges on the sidewalk, perhaps 30 of them, stacked without care, the top ones slightly dusty, a handwritten price sign. Nobody guarding them, nobody watching whether someone took one or didn't. They were simply there, in a crate, in the cold, available to whoever wanted to pay the posted price, and entirely indifferent to the fact that 4,000 kilometers away, a woman in Zwickau was managing on a reduced bread allocation, and her daughter had not seen an orange in 3 years. Lenny stood beside her. She didn't say anything. She looked at the oranges the way she had looked at the first glass of juice, not with longing, not with anger, with the specific quality of someone completing a measurement they had already begun elsewhere. "The letter," Marta said quietly. "And this?" "Yes," Lenny said. Both true at the same time. "Yes." They stood on the sidewalk in the cold Tennessee morning and looked at the oranges in the crate. An American woman in a red coat came out of the dry goods store and walked past them to her car without glancing at the crate at all, because a crate of oranges on a sidewalk in winter was not something that required a second look. It was not a sight. It was just a Wednesday. Marta thought about her classroom. 26 desks, the text on the board. Don't tell me what it says, tell me what it wants. She had been asking this question about every text she encountered for 5 days. The breakfast, the medic, the guard on the ship, the camp that functioned with the ease of a system operating well within its means. She had finally found the right text to ask it of. The crate of oranges on the sidewalk did not want anything complicated. It wanted exactly what Lenny had said on the ship that first evening in the port facility when Marta had called her framework insufficient. What if some places just have enough and they give it because giving it costs them nothing? She had said places like that don't exist. She was standing 20 feet from the evidence that she was wrong. It had been there the whole time. While the lessons were thin and the bread allocation was reduced, and her students sat in 9 empty desks and her neighbor traded her grandmother's locket for potatoes. While all of that was happening, a sidewalk in Tennessee had a crate of oranges on it with a handwritten price sign and nobody standing guard. She looked at the oranges. She had a theory available. The economic argument, the geography of supply, the complex machinery of war and resource distribution. She had the words for it. She had always had the words for everything. She did not say any of them. Because she had taught for 8 years that the most important thing about reading a text was the willingness to let it tell you what it meant, rather than deciding first and reading second. She had taught this to children who were still young enough to do it without resistance. She had apparently not been doing it herself. "Marta," Lenny said. "I know," Marta said. Lenny looked at her. "I know," she said again. "I've known for several days. I was just..." She stopped. "I was still looking for the notation that would fit it into the existing map. And the existing map is of a place that doesn't exist." They stood there a moment longer. The street went about its business around them. The ordinary Wednesday morning of a place that had never had to justify its existence to anyone. Then one of the guards moved slightly, and the women began collecting back toward the truck, and Marta turned away from the crate without taking anything from it or looking back at it. She had what she needed from it already. She walked back to the truck through the cold morning with the particular quality of someone who has just put down something heavy they have been carrying for a long time, and is not yet sure whether to feel lighter or simply different. Lenny walked beside her and said nothing, which was what the moment required. The truck moved back through the farmland in the thin winter light. Nobody said anything for a long time. Berta, who had a theory for everything, sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the canvas and did not produce a theory for what the morning had been. The Tennessee countryside passed in the gray afternoon, the farmhouses with their smoke, the fields, the bare trees against the pale sky. All of it ordinary, all of it intact. All of it, Marta now understood, a measurement, not of American generosity, not of Allied superiority or propaganda or the particular goodness of any soldier who had handed over a piece of medicine without being asked. A measurement of distance, the distance between what was possible and what had been decided, the distance between a crate of oranges on a sidewalk in winter and a woman in Zwickau managing on bread when there was bread. Someone had made that distance. And a country's character was not in what it said about itself. It was in what it did with enough when it had it. Whether the oranges went in the crate or behind the glass, whether the tray came down the counter full or thin, whether the man with the medicine kit walked through the room or stayed at his post. She looked at the canvas and the passing farmland and thought about the map she needed to build now. Not a replacement for the old one, not a framework for a new set of conclusions, just the honest map of what was actually here when you looked at it without deciding first what you needed to see. She would begin with the breakfast. She would begin with Tuesday. The notice was posted on a Thursday. A single sheet on the board outside the administration building. Official letterhead, the measured language of institutional process. All German prisoners of war held in United States custody would be repatriated to the occupied zones by the end of spring 1946. Ships were being prepared. Groups would depart in sequence. Specific dates to follow. Marta read it twice and walked back to the barracks. She sat on her bunk and looked at her hands. The Tennessee morning was the same as every other, cold and gray and smelling of pine and the kitchen chimney going about its early business. She could hear the distant sounds of the camp waking up. Somewhere near the perimeter, a truck was idling. Lenny came in from the waterline and saw her face and sat down without asking. "The board," Marta said. "I saw it," Lenny said. They sat there for a moment and the morning continued outside without adjustment. The specific dates arrived 2 weeks later. Their group was scheduled for the second week of April. A truck to the rail station, a train north, a ship from New York. The female officer explained the process in her careful German, answered questions, moved on. The camp administration produced the information with the same efficient indifference it produced everything. Not unkind, not kind, simply functional. The system doing what systems did when a process reached its conclusion. That evening, the barracks was quieter than it had been in months. Not the silence of the first nights, the tense, watchful quiet of people who had not yet established the temperature of their situation. This was a different silence, the silence of people who had established the temperature and were now looking at what it meant to leave it. Berta sat on her bunk with a letter she had been writing and not finishing for 3 days. The woman from Dresden, who had held her fork halfway to her mouth on the first morning, was looking at the wall with the expression of someone performing an internal calculation that had no clean answer. Several women were writing. Several were not doing anything in particular and were honest about it. Lenny had her mother's letter out again, the same one, worn now at the fold from having been opened and reread and refolded over the months. She was not reading it. She was holding it. "Zwickau," she said. "Yes," Marta said. "The bread allocation, the neighbor's family." "Yes." Lenny folded the letter and held it in her lap. "My brother might be home by now." She didn't say, but she might not know either. Marta looked at the window. April outside, the Tennessee spring arriving with the unhurried confidence of something that happened here every year without exception. The trees along the perimeter had been greening for 2 weeks. The air in the morning had lost its sharpness. "What does Hamburg look like now?" Marta said. She was not asking Lenny. She was asking herself, or asking the room, or asking the question outward into the space where answers of that kind lived. Neither of them had seen it since 1944. The last breakfast was a Wednesday. Marta was awake before the bell. She dressed in the dark the same way she had dressed every morning since the first one. Economically without light, her hands knowing where everything was from repetition. She sat on the edge of her bunk and waited. Lenny dropped from the upper bunk and landed lightly. They walked to the mess hall in the early April morning. The air mild and damp, the pine trees along the path holding their new green against the gray sky. The kitchen chimney was going. The smell was already there before the doors, warm and fried and real, belonging to the morning the way mornings here had always organized themselves, without announcement and without apology. The line formed, the doors opened. Marta picked up her tray. The American woman behind the counter placed the items without asking, the same as she had every morning for 4 months. Biscuits, gravy, eggs, sausage, coffee, the small glass of orange juice cold and bright. She carried the tray to the table and sat down. She did not look at it with the analytical attention of the first morning, reading for structure, looking for strategy, testing the text for what it wanted beneath what it said. She looked at it the way she looked at things that had already told her what they were. She ate slowly. Around the table, women ate in the particular quality of a last morning, which was not dramatic but had a specific weight to it, the awareness of the ordinary as ordinary, the way you hear a sound differently when you know it will stop, the coffee, the warmth of the room, the smell of biscuits and fat, and the sound of women at their breakfast in a mess hall in Tennessee on a Wednesday in April. Lenny picked up the orange juice. She held it for a moment, not to the light, not to examine it, just held it the way you hold something before you put it down for the last time. Then she drank it and set the glass on the tray and picked up her fork. 4 months, she said. Yes, Marta said. Every morning. Lenny looked at her plate. My father never had a morning like this in 18 years. She said it the way she had said it the first time. Not with bitterness, not with accusation, just setting the measurement on the table, and letting it be the size it was. Marta ate her biscuit. She was thinking about what she would carry back to Hamburg. Not the food. She understood she was not carrying the food back. Not the camp, not the mess hall, not the Tennessee countryside with its intact farmhouses and its indifferent cattle. None of that was transferable. Germany was rubble and occupied zones, and her neighbor's grandmother's locket gone for potatoes, and 26 desks with 9 of them empty. What she was carrying back was the measurement, the distance between what was possible and what had been decided, between a crate of oranges on a sidewalk and a reduced bread allocation, between a medic who moved through a room without being called, and a system that had looked at what there was and allocated it to produce a specific result, and had told the people at the bottom of that allocation that the shortage was real, that the enemies at the borders had made it so that there was no other way for things to be. There was another way for things to be. She was sitting inside the evidence of it, had been sitting inside it every morning for 4 months. A country's character was not in its declarations or its flags, or the speeches made from its podiums. It was in what it did with enough when it had it. Whether the tray came down the counter full or thin, whether the man with the medicine kit crossed the room because he had been told to, or because he looked at a sick woman and saw that she was sick, whether the oranges went behind glass or in a crate on the sidewalk in winter with a handwritten price and no one standing guard. This country had enough. What it did with enough, the ordinary, unguarded, unheroic dailiness of what it did with enough, was not propaganda. It was not a gesture for the Red Cross or a strategy for prisoner compliance or a deliberate policy of comfort designed to produce a specific psychology. It was Tuesday, just Tuesday, which was, she had come to understand, the most honest thing a country could show you. Not its best day, not what it did under observation or in crisis or when history was watching. What it did on an ordinary Wednesday in April, when nothing was required of it except to put a tray on a counter and let it be what it was. She finished her biscuit. She drank her coffee. Around her, the mess hall carried on its last morning. The women eating, the guard at the far wall doing nothing in particular, the kitchen sounds behind the counter, the April light coming gray and mild through the windows. Ordinary, unremarkable. The specific unremarkableness of a place that had never had to perform what it was because it simply was it. "Marta," Lenny said. "Yes. When we get back, if I can get to Zwickau." She paused. "I'm going to make my mother a cup of real coffee. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way." Marta looked at her. "And I'm going to put it in front of her without saying anything," Lenny said. "And she'll taste it, and she'll know." Marta looked at her coffee cup, the last one. She thought about Hamburg, the classroom, the empty desks, the children she had taught to ask what the text wanted rather than what it said. "When you do," she said quietly, "tell her it came from someone who learned to read more carefully." Lenny looked at her. Then she nodded, a single small motion, and picked up her fork and finished her breakfast. Outside, the Tennessee morning opened into its ordinary April day, green and mild and entirely unaware of itself, the way a place was unaware of itself when nothing about it needed to be defended. The trees along the perimeter, the kitchen chimney, the cattle somewhere beyond the wire standing in the spring fields with their perfect indifference to history. All of it here, all of it, quietly, without declaration, just here,